Hello and welcome to this episode of the Queen Bee podcast. Joining me today is Pennie Scott, who is widely known as the Bush Goddess, a powerhouse of rural resilience, fierce advocacy, and creative enterprise. Born and raised on farms in Wiradjuri country, Pennie has spent decades as a trailblazing health professional, writer, speaker, and political candidate, all while staying deeply grounded to her connection to the land. With qualifications in rural health, nutrition, and leadership, she's worked across the spectrum from hands-on food production through to policy reform. Pennie is not just known for her extraordinary capacity to speak truth to power, but also for her ability to hold space for deep listening and healing. As a woman who's been around the traps, she brings fierce feminine wisdom, regenerative ethics, and the lived experience of a matriarch who walks between worlds, urban and rural, political and personal, seen and unseen. Through her business, The Bush Goddess, she offers workshops, storytelling, and advocacy to support the sovereignty of people, food, systems, and country. Welcome, Pennie.
Good morning, Tanya, and I'm astonished that that's what I do. So I'm sort of feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome here.
Ooh, who is this person?
But I'm very honoured to be part of your Queen Bee series. Thank you.
My pleasure. Now, as someone who walks between worlds, can you share what that means for you and more specifically, I guess, how it shapes your work across rural communities, politics, and healing spaces?
What a question. The first thing that my major characteristic, and I did this personality test with Martin Seligman's positive psychology, and my strongest characteristic is curiosity, which for teachers is just one of the most dreadful things in a child. You just want them to be obedient and mute. And that I am not and never have been. So curiosity drives and powers how I look at things, how I literally see them, how I physically feel them, because intuition is a very, very, very strong part of how I operate. And listening, so important, and humility. So to move between these different realms, urban and rural, I've always think, start listening first, get the feel, intuit as that part of the feel, and then ask questions. And it's not about me, it's about other people, and how can I learn more from other people? And asking questions is obviously one of the most extraordinary ways to do it. When I meet somebody for the first time, I love to ask them, and what are your passions? I said, oh. And sadly, a lot of rural blokes don't have them. Or who are you? Oh, I'm a farmer. I'm an accountant. No, that's what you do. Who are you? And many people have not given that concept a thought. So I'm hoping to leave a little spark in there which might ignite and help them spend some time formulating and thinking about, well, who am I? What does that mean? So that's asking questions. Being grateful is the attitude of gratitude is everything. And a little bit later, I would love to talk about how we can change our body chemistry simply by changing the words we speak. It is so powerful and effective. So that's the seen and the unseen is such an important part because we live in multiple dimensions and realms. Western reductionist science would have us say otherwise, that everything you dice and splice and dissect and take it into its many components. And that's what it is. Life force, what is it? Consciousness. However, trying to put them all back together again, there's a really big missing element. Some people call it the X factor. But in reality, there is so much more than reductionist science can ever explain or see or try and emulate, even though there are scientists trying to improve photosynthesization. Oh my God. Trying to improve seed species through genetic manipulation and engineering. Nature, Mama Nature, Mother Earth is the sole supplier of all the intelligences and creativity and law, L-A-W and L-O-R-E, that we humans need to live a happy, harmonious, joyous life. That sort of wandered into philosophy then. Right. But the seen and the unseen is just so important. If we only believe what we see, we're missing out on so much other.
Yeah, and I really feel that so much. I think it's really interesting how much it's almost focused on simplifying things. We've got to keep it simple, which means that we lose the depth and the quality of the experience. And it's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to live 75 years. It's like, okay, that might be the length, but how wide, how deep is that life going to be? It could be just like this narrow thread that you just, follow all the things all the way through, but it could be so much more if you just explore and expand and be open to more than just the simple and the easy.
And that you're describing there, the quantitative 75 years in a linear line, or where I think we need to be doing a lot more qualitative, which might be circular, it might be spiral, it might be wavy and bendy and string philosophy and game theories, all these different exciting possibilities where we can go. I firmly believe that for the past 45 years, there has been deliberate social engineering and dumbing down of humans at our peril. And so we don't have to make decisions now. Oh, there's a pandemic around. All you do was to stop it, we'll just jab unknown things into people's bodies.
Yeah.
And the lemmings took it. They all jumped over the cliff together without having any critical analysis of what this actually was about. And I know this can be contentious, and I chose not to become part of a global medical experiment. And I'm very, very pleased I did not. But that was strong intuition. The moment I heard Gladys Berejiklian saying, well, of course, we can't get back to normal until we all have vaccines. And I thought, oh, no, 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 no. No, no, no. It's untested, it's untried, it's made by a pharmaceutical company. So, no. So that was intuitive, very much the seen and the unseen as an example there.
Well, if we come back to your journey from farming roots through to standing as an independent political candidate, what have been some of the biggest shifts or realizations about power and voice in rural Australia that you've discovered?
It's a wonderful question again. And part of my generation of being female and in the country is that you always put others first before yourself. And when you do that, you often don't have time for yourself to even think an original thought. And so making the decision to contest the seat of Riverina, I'd been thinking about it for years. And the final push was the appalling or the total lack of representation from the current member, whom I've had dealings with and I've written on concerns and issues, and I just get a letter back saying, we know what we're doing, if they're in government, we know what we're doing. And if they're not in government, oh yes, the Labor Party has been absolutely reckless with them not having a conversation with me. And I thought, how many other people are being treated like this? Let's actually do true representation. And that's what really motivated me to, take that big step. And it is a big step. And I was pleased that I did, learning so much, listening to people. And part of being a good representative is being a good negotiator. It's not just putting up that voice there, but you have to come to some outcome.
Yeah.
And so negotiating skills are really important. And to be a great negotiator, you have to listen intently with purpose, not be defensive, but listen and be creative and imaginative in potential outcomes. And that excites me because, well, there's a new set of thinking between every set of ears. There's no brain that thinks like everybody else, and everybody else thinks like that brain. So that's always a marvelous challenge and an opportunity to create new. So not just finding common ground, but how can we create new ground to come to an even more advantageous and efficient outcome than the original situation.
For you, and I guess also for the community, what was the biggest growth from that experience in terms of actually standing up, saying, look, we're not going to put up with this anymore. I'm putting myself forward. Let's learn what's actually going on here.
It was actually using my voice.
Yeah.
Hard as it seems to imagine, I haven't always come forward. And during successive marriages and relationships, my voice was not able to speak out. Let's put it that way. So I've had lots of energy and enthusiasm, but actually being able to put it into action had not always been possible. However, being a single woman gives me so much more time to think, to dwell, to imagine, and to create, and to participate with others. And it's for the first time in my life, it might sound really weird, that I have the closest cohort of women friends now. And that was something that I didn't really have before. So I'm so grateful. I have these widely intelligent, curious, creative, generous, thoughtful, compassionate women in my life. That has made such a difference to how I can be and who I am.
And I'm really interested, and I guess this is coming from my transformational perspective, but what was the catalyst that kind of shifted you into this new way of being?
Not being distracted by having somebody else to always think of. So that having that solitude, which is not loneliness by any means, but actually having solitude to think and not be 100% active all the time, always busy doing something. Actually stopping with respect for myself, and that self-worth was a big one, and self-respect, and realizing that I actually have value. And other people thought that too, but it was me starting to provide radical self-care for myself. I'd never heard that term. Self-care after a rather unfortunate incident at the end of my third relationship. And I had counselling for the first time in my life. And this male counsellor, I thought, oh, he's not going to be any good. He won't understand. Anyway, he was brilliant. And he said, Penny, when was the last time you did some radical self-care? And I said, what's that? He said, go and have a massage, go and see a movie, go and spend time by yourself. And I said, oh, Lordy, might have been 4 years ago when I went for a ride on my horse. And that was beautiful. And he said, we'll do that more often. So that appreciating myself as a woman of worth and value was really critical. 2018 was a horrible year.
Mm.
And there were a number of catalysts in that. At the end of 2017, I separated from my partner of 14 years. And so we lived under the same roof because we had a farm, but we were separate. I said, that's it. No, we're gone. And then in July 2018, my youngest son died very suddenly at the age of 22. And that former partner became emotionally abusive at probably the most vulnerable time of my life.
Yeah.
And then I had to take an AVO out against him.
Mm.
And that was when I got the counselling. And when somebody feeds back to you, I was just thinking, oh, well, you just get on with life and you do this and da da da. And he said, Penny, you've been through traumas.
Yes.
I had not recognised that at all. I said, well, just keep going. He said, no. You need to stop. And you need to start putting yourself in the picture, not thinking about everybody else and how they're doing. And so that was a complete turnaround. And sell the farm as well. So it was a very big year, put it that way. And I know I'm strong. I know that I was never going to be defined by grief. I made that decision 2 days after Andy transitioned. I'm not going to be defined by grief. And anyway, he would hate that, seeing me being maudlin. But I also had 75 of his uni friends to take care of because they'd never had someone in their midst just disappear so suddenly and never be there again. So I was looking after them as well, their emotional needs. And we had parties and dinners and they came out to my farm and we shared time and a lot of alcohol and cried together and shared stories. And that was such a healing process.
It sounds beautiful.
It was just extraordinary. And so I'm very fortunate that Andy played first 15 rugby for the Wagga Ag College, and their mortal foes, the Wagga Waratahs, the president of that club, after Andy left, established an annual cup between the two clubs, and it's actually tomorrow. So I'm hurtling to Wagga, and it's a reunion of all his friends, and that is so nourishing for my soul. We're celebrating missing Andy. His memory and his legacy lives on so strongly in his friends' hearts and the community and my family, of course. And so it's a celebration of that. But yes, that was a turning point in looking after myself.
Yeah.
So I've become a lot better at that. And living by myself is honestly one of the greatest gifts that I can give myself.
And that's such a beautiful moment. It's kind of like, I don't want to move on from this, but I will move on from this for a moment. So coming back to your work with food, how did your background in nutrition and rural health evolve into a broader mission around food sovereignty and regenerative systems?
So I was so fortunate, Tanya, for my families, my mother's family, my father's families. And from a very early age, everything was grown. I'm on the farm. So we had milking cows, we had chooks, we had beef and sheep, chickens, we had bees, veggie garden, orchard. And Mum is just an extraordinary cook because we lived 70 miles out of town. And so you just didn't pop into town
Mm.
I'm out of salt, gosh. So I had to think ahead. But it was really interesting that how many people would come out from Deniliquin,
Mm.
and say, "Oh, I'm just passing by. I thought I'd pop in." Well, we're 70 miles from town. The drive in was 3 miles. I should be talking about kilometers, but it was miles. And just passing by, I thought I'd pop in. And it was always about lunchtime. Always.
Oh,
So
what a surprise.
mum was, oh, lovely. And of course, country hospitality is you welcome everybody who walks in the door. And she said, not a problem. And she would create these feasts out of thin air. She had a well-stocked pantry. We had cool rooms, and it was just a beautiful station life, and with
Yeah.
all those facets of what it is. And she said, no worries. And she'd be standing in the pantry saying, what the hell? What was it? What's coming? And then come out and be totally gracious again. So the art of producing a feast out of thin air, but it wasn't thin air because we always had those beautiful staple ingredients grown at home. So that was provenance, but also because they were grown without chemicals, they were just it set a palate benchmark, unadulterated foods. And that is one of the greatest gifts that I've ever had, is that I can remember what proper food tastes like.
Yes.
And using that as my marker means that I can always suss out shit. That's a technical term for shit food. Manufactured, over-processed, bleh, so many unnatural ingredients. And that's why I've just been passionate and probably quite manic about eating properly. And then I studied naturopathic medicine after the birth of my second son, in between sons 2 and 3. And my mother's father, had been first studied ag science and veterinary medicine. That was back in the 30s. Then he studied pharmacy. Then he studied medicine and specialized in ophthalmology. So we think he was probably autistic, serious. And I mean that just as an observation, because he had no social skills. And he was very gruff and brusque and didn't like people very much. But his capacity to learn, and it wasn't orthodox medicine as we know it now. I would spend time with him on weekends at the little farm they had out of Ballarat. And he would mutter around and wear odd socks, and his glasses skew whiff on his face, hair standing on end. But his knowledge of nature and systems in the ground, around the trees, all those things, and he'd mutter away, not necessarily to me, but I would pick up what he was saying and his recognition of things. And that was a really important grounding for me. And I also had the privilege of spending time with my other grandfather, my father's father, and had a dairy shorthorn stud and a Dorset horn stud, so dairy cattle and sheep meat. And being around the stock is always interesting. And it was you just move with them. You don't drove or hush them. You listen to them, you watch them, have plenty of time, and talk to them. So these are really important foundational lessons that I learned. And also from my first father-in-law, who was a wonderful cattleman, very gentle. Fellas, time to come in now. And so you have those conversations, and you don't have to be forceful. You can just have a chat. And that's how I've always had my animals, my horses, cattle, pigs, cats, ducks. You just have a conversation with them. I call them my kith and my kin. They are my non-human brothers and sisters, because they have equal right to existence in a beautiful life.
Yes.
And apart from certain breaks, which they're having a one-way ticket, they've all been very good. So,
We have pigs, and
do you?
yes, yes. So our philosophy is that they might have a really shit last day,
Yep.
but as long as they have a good life,
Yes.
and
Yep,
yeah,
fine.
they know their names and they come, and I mean even we've got a pair of goats as well, and I just call, come on boys, time to go back in, and they come running because they know that's their name.
Yes. I had my piggies. Oh my gosh, I love my piggies. I had Stewie, who was my first celebrity piggy. And we did
Celebrity piggy.
absolutely. Yeah, he was so quiet. And I established the Eat Local Thursday farmers markets in Wagga. And Stewie was the pin-up boy. And so he started when he was this big and would
Yep.
come and we'd have a little enclosure for him, and he'd be fed apples and carrots and goodness knows what else until he was stuffed. He couldn't move. And he got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until he was about 260 kilos. But
Wow.
I still transported him in the back of my car. And so driving through Wagga in summer, his head out the window, and other motorists would see. I just say, holy moly, that's a pig. You know, his head's this big. And he's just looking out the window. He was just fabulous.
If you're enjoying our interview with Pennie as much as I did, please come and hear the rest of it on our Queen Bee portal. You can access it through any of our memberships. If you would like it through our free membership, it is the Queen's Be Free one. Come join us and check out this recording and all the others as well.